Hello students, in our last video we worked on decomposition of polynomials when the value of a is equal to 1. And now we're going to focus on a process called factoring grouping, which is when a does not equal 1. So if you look at your polynomial, and it should be written in standard form, and we concentrate on that a value, we notice that there is a coefficient in front of x squared other than 1. So our first couple of steps are going to be very similar. We're still going to multiply our first times last, our a times c, and then we're still going to think about all the values that multiply to negative 24 and then add to the middle term, negative 2. So the two numbers that I come up with are negative 6 and 4, because those do in fact add to negative 2. But normally we would circle those and those would represent our pair, but this time we're going to use these pairs to rewrite this negative 2x. So we're going to bring down our 8x squared, and then we are going to rewrite negative 2 as positive 4x and a minus 6x, and then bring down our minus 3. And this is where the factor by grouping begins. In math, when we group, we represent groups through parentheses. So I'm going to group my first two terms together, and I'm going to add it to my second two terms grouped together. And then I'm going to look for GCFs. And with factor by grouping, I always have 2 rounds of GCFs. So we're on our first round right now. And I notice that 4x is a GCF, which leaves me with 2x plus 1. And then I'm going to take out negative 3, and that leaves me with 2x plus 1 as my GCF over here. And then my second round of GCF is the 2x plus 1. So if you think about a GCF, you take out your GCF and you multiply by what's left over, right? So that's what we did here. We took out our GCF and we multiplied by what was left over. We took out our GCF and we multiplied by what was left over. Well, now I want to do the same exact thing, but I'm looking at the entire term. So I notice 2x plus 1 is here, and I notice that it is here as well. So I'm going to take out 2x plus 1, and I'm going to multiply by what's left over. And this represents your final answer. Okay, looking at another example, I'm in standard form. My a value is not equal to 1, so I'm going to have to factor by grouping. First times last is equal to 4. Two terms that multiply to 4 and add to 5 are 4 and positive 1. So I'm going to rewrite 5x in terms of the 4 and the 1. So I have 2x squared plus 4x plus x plus 2 is equal to 0. I'm then going to group my first two terms together, and I'm going to add it to my second two terms grouped together. And I'm going to look for my first round of GCFs. So in the first set of parentheses, I have 2x. I'm going to multiply by what is left over. In my second set of parentheses, I don't have a GCF, so I'm just going to leave it as is. And then looking at the entire polynomial, I notice I have an x plus 2 here. I have another x plus 2 here. So I'm going to take out my GCF, and I'm going to multiply by what's left over. Notice that there's an understood 1. I'm going to write that in. There's an understood 1 here, right? So when I wrote what was left over, I wrote the 2x plus 1 because it's an understood 1. Okay? All right, and of course, if you don't feel confident that that's your answer, you can go and multiply, FOIL that through, and you should end up with your trinomial that you started with. One last example, a is not equal to 1, so we're going to factor by grouping. 3 times 5 is equal to 15. Two numbers that multiply to 15 and add to 8 are 3 and 5. So I'm going to rewrite x squared, or excuse me, I'm going to rewrite 8x as 3x plus 5x. I'm going to group my first two terms. I'm going to add it and group my second two terms. I'm going to do my first rounds of GCF. I'm going to grab my GCF out of the second group. And now I'm going to look at the entire polynomial, and I notice that I have x plus 1 and an x plus 1. So I'm going to take out my GCF, and I am going to multiply by what is left over, and that is 3x plus 5. And again, I can multiply that, FOIL it through to see if I end up back at my original trinomial. Again, this process is called factor by grouping. We do this anytime our a value is not equal to 1. I hope you found this video helpful. As always, if you have any questions or concerns, please don't hesitate to reach out.